I can't live like this anymore. Everywhere I look, there's clutter, disorder, stuff piling up, whether it's my workshop, my home office, or even my bedroom. It's all just a mess. And not only does that make me less productive, but as someone with ADD, it makes me downright miserable. And the only respite I have from that sense of unhappiness, the only physical spaces in my life where things feel sufficiently organized, are the places where I've 3D printed solutions to make it so. So today, I'm declaring war. A war on clutter. Because over the next 20 or so minutes, I'll not only transform my workspace into somewhere I actually enjoy being, but also introduce you to 4 powerful organization systems and a handful of new and incredible upgrades to those systems, including some that I'd never heard of before. 10 out of 10, S-tier 3D printed design. This is the reason you buy a 3D printer. Plus, along the way, we'll apply some very clever and advanced 3D printing techniques that have only become possible in the last year or so to make these systems even better. Let's get after it. For the first video in the series, we'll handle the low-hanging fruit, which means 3D printing solutions here in the workshop. Now, I've been 3D printing organization solutions for years at this point. It was literally the first video on this channel, so we have a very solid foundation to start with. And as such, I'm not going to be rehashing old systems, except for to explain why I chose each one of them for that specific purpose. But for this video, we have some luxuries that we just didn't have 4 or 5 years ago. And I intend to make good use of them. Whether that's multi-material 3D printing, printing with engineering-grade materials that require a heated chamber, or just waste-free multicolor printing. A lot of things have become possible, and we'd be foolish not to use them. So for these reasons, while I'm going to need to put my entire print farm to work to make a reasonable dent in this disaster mess in a week, for the most challenging prints, things like multi-material combinations or abrasive engineering grade filaments, I'm going to be leaning heavily on the new Creator 5 Pro from this video's sponsor, FlashForge. But don't worry, I'm not going to pitch you on the printer in some traditional ad spot. I'm just going to let the results speak for themselves as we go along. I will just say, though, that I've been genuinely impressed, especially at this price point, and that we'll leave a link in the description should you decide to pick one up. Oh, and one more thing before we actually get started, because I know that some of you are probably already typing in the comments below about how 3D printing isn't the solution to everything, or that this project uses so much filament and only makes sense if you get it for free. But let me remind you that not everyone has woodworking skills, and in many cases, 3D printing is by far the easiest and most approachable way for folks to solve their problems. I mean, you just hit print and do a little bit of assembly. No cutting off your finger with the saw required. Plus, I'm not sure what lumber prices are where you live, but filament prices worldwide continue to plummet. And I'm not sure that any of these solutions are actually going to cost more than either store-bought or woodworking alternatives, especially if you factor in your time. And just one more thing, which is to be even more frank, given just how miserable all this clutter and mess has been making me recently, even if I were paying for my own filament, I'm pretty sure that this would be worth multiple thousands of dollars for me to solve once and for all. It really means that much to me. So on that note, let's first solve a problem that I don't imagine I'll get much sympathy for, which is excess filament. I know, poor me, but lately, every time I've been testing a new printer, the brand generously sends me like 10 to 20 kilos of their own filament, and well, even after donating some of it to a few local robotics clubs or charity drives, I've just run out of space to put what's left. I know, poor me. Like I said. So for this one, we're going to be going with a classic solution, and that is the RepRack by Pooch over at Repcord. Although there's a version 2 of this, which Pooch recently made available, and just generally tons of remixes to expand it, I still chose to go with the classic because A, that means that my various different setups in 3 different locations in the studio are gonna all be interchangeable. B, I don't really need any of the features of the new version. And C, it's just what I'm familiar and comfortable with. Oh, and in case you're seeing the footage on screen right now and thinking to yourself, that seems awfully high up. Isn't it gonna be really inconvenient to get to? Well, not to worry, because of course I 3D printed a couple different solutions to that problem as well. like I said, we're solving everything with 3D printing in this video. Now, to be completely honest with you guys, I didn't film a lot of the printing or installation for this because there's really nothing too exciting about it. This was just something that I needed to do to get all the boxes of filament off the floor so we actually know what filament we have for the rest of the project, and so that we have actual room to move around in the studio. But I did do one little clever bit of modifying and 3D printing that I want to share. So as you can see, the poles that I bought were just long enough to reach about 30 centimeters away from the wall. And that's not long enough to put two brackets, so we are going to need to connect the poles so that they're properly balanced. Now in the past, I've tried to weld the pipes together and that didn't go so well.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
So despite the fact that I have since bought a much more delicate MIG welder, thanks to all of your recommendations, I did decide to avoid the whole hornet's nest altogether. Instead, I decided to print some friction fit plugs that will connect the two poles together. Now for strength, I used some Sunlu PC ABS, which should print beautifully in the heated chamber of the C5 Pro, which by the way, in my experience with polycarbonate mixes, is no small feat. And anyways, just for good measure, I designed these parts to be printed lying down, so we don't have to worry about them cracking at the layer lines once they're loaded with filament. Anyways, they should be done printing now, so let's go see how they work, shall we? With the filament out of the way, I could finally come to terms with how much of it I've accumulated. And thus, the next order of business was to use some of that old filament to expand my already sizable Gridfinity collection by adding yet another massive 60 by 110 centimeter drawer to my shelves turned tables. Now this involves printing custom spacer bracket things for my shelves so I can put some heavy duty drawer slides on there, and then bolting on a piece of plywood with some 3D printed handles. This time though, I did choose to use predominantly Gridfinity ultralight bins because I'm gonna be storing larger stuff here like blower fans, and I just don't need to waste filament on things like finger scoops or labels. But the teachable moment here, and the value that I think I can give to all of you, is why I actually chose Gridfinity when it's just so much printing. And the answer is because it's compatible with all of my other drawers. This might seem like a sunk cost fallacy, but it ultimately does mean that I can move entire workstations, for example, my old soldering station, to this new location in seconds. And then I can take all of my CNC bits, which are somehow still stored in the location where the CNC was 2 locations ago, and move them over here. It's all seamless, frictionless, and requires no additional printing and no additional thinking or planning. My point here is a lot of the times when people tell me that they don't want to get hooked on Gridfinity because it's a rabbit hole that seems like too much printing, I remind them that this system, just like any other modular system we're going to show in this video, or otherwise, it's an investment. Unless you permanently mark your bins, you can always move them and repurpose them ad infinitum. And I often catch myself using or repurposing bins that I printed 5 years ago. And yeah, I get it. It's a lot of printing up front, but come on guys, filament is really cheap these days. And personally, I can't put a price tag on the level of sheer satisfaction that I get seeing this versus this. I mean, it's night and day. But speaking of awesome modular systems that I've spent way too much time and filament printing over the years, one annoying source of clutter and frustration that remains for me is my multi-build bits and bobs. Now, as you can probably tell, I rely very heavily on Multiboard to keep my tools and video equipment organized. It's honestly 2 of the very few things in my studio that I can always find because everything has a place and it's just easier to put them back than to find a spot on the table or the floor. Though I will note, side note, that I did recently give up on the idea of covering my shelf faces in Multiboard or honeycomb storage wall because it ended up just being too damn annoying and inconvenient to access the shelves, which ultimately caused me to just drop stuff on the tables instead of putting it away. But in a future video in the series, I think I have a solution for the ugly facade that's left behind. But because I do still rely so heavily on this system on the walls, I keep a lot of spare parts of at least 50 different types on hand at any time should I want to move or mount something. Plus, because I have both white and black multi-board setups throughout my studio, I also keep a lot of those parts in 2 different colors as well. The net effect of all this is that I've ended up with baskets and organizer trays full of these parts, and I never know what I have or what I need to print or even where to find it when I need it. So instead, I've decided to organize my 3D printed parts using 3D printing. Now the thing is, I often need these throughout the studio, so I do want to make a mobile setup similar to those types of Gridfinity carrying case designs that I've seen many of over the years. Unfortunately, the multi-build alternative to this system is still a work in progress. Plus, I personally prefer to store all of this in Gridfinity bins rather than multi-bins for the simple reason of cross-compatibility should I ever decide to change things up in the future. So, Gridfinity. Initially, I tried to take a parametric version of the Gridfinity rugged case and turn it into this monster 500 by 500 beast of a thing, but that didn't work out. First of all, the print failed because the printer just wasn't calibrated properly, but beyond that, it very quickly made me realize that this design is just not optimized to be scaled up this big, and even if the print had turned out perfectly, it would have been very, very flimsy. Plus, a lid this big would have probably just snapped off the hinges if I'd tried to prop it up. Fortunately, I found this awesome modular system by Shui Lab called the Schubox. It's unique for a few different reasons. First, it's modular and expandable. You can actually stack and lock the cases on top of one another so that if you run out of space, you can just stack another box on top. Now, this also means that you don't need to carry everything across the room if all you need is, say, fasteners. It's also designed to be extremely rigid, so it's not likely to break or tip over. And finally, what really bought me was that there are upgrades to turn it into a set of drawers in the future should you want to mount multiple racks of them onto the wall, or turn it into a full standalone rolling gear cart. Honestly, Shui Lab has built a very comprehensive and well thought out ecosystem here, and I am genuinely excited and impressed about this. The only downside I did find is that in order to print the larger size that I personally would have wanted, you're gonna need a very big printer, like 350 by 350, and at the moment, I actually only have one printer that can handle that size reliably, which would just delay this whole project. No worries though, because we can test out a few units for a week or two, and if we like it, we can always repurpose those and print a larger one at our convenience. And actually, after printing the 5x4, I realized that there's a 5x5 that maxes out most of my printer's build plates, like the C5 Pro, and this is really cool, you can stack the 5x4 on top of the 5x5. So again, like I said, nothing is wasted when you invest in modular ecosystems that use actual standards and build on themselves. In any case, I noticed that the model has some pretty steep overhangs, which will interface with the drawer slides in the future should we choose to use them. So I actually opted to just take advantage of the multi-material capability and the hardened steel nozzles that come standard on the Creator 5 Pro. So I used PLA supports with 0 distance and then Prusament PETG CF on the base and lid. And then I ran off a quick multicolor print using Prusament PETG for the accents. For comparison's sake, I printed the base on the Creator 5 Pro and the lid on the Snapmaker U1, which I and many of you consider to be the absolute standard bearer for print quality right now. And here are the results. They're absolutely indistinguishable, so well done, FlashForge. Now, let's go ahead and get it assembled and try it out before we decide whether or not to sink more filament into this system. So yeah, these things are dope. Super functional, super rigid, expandable in the future so I don't run out of space like I did with these store-bought ones. And I mean, the way that they just click together, You've got to love that. And I love that I can have different heights and different sizes for different parts. Now, as you can see, I managed to get the vast majority of my multi-board collection into just 2 of these, largely because I realized that I really didn't need about 1/3 of the stuff that was digging around in all these old baskets, and I didn't even know I had. So for now, I did go ahead and double stack some of the bins inside, and I didn't separate by color, but I am actually printing at least 1 more of these bins in the background here so that I won't have to stack vertically, which will allow me to see everything that I have in one glance. Now, the only issue that I had was that the labels and the hinge clasps didn't want to go in without a fight, but I think that's because I chose to print with PETG CF, which has a rougher surface, because honestly, just scaling down the labels about 0.5% made it much better in the subsequent go around. Though I do think that I personally might choose to use peel and stick labels for these in the future, because removing the hinges and the 3D printed labels is really not convenient if I want to do it frequently enough that I can just choose to move bins from one case to another. And that is one of the major perks of Gridfinity. So I want it to be really, really easy to rearrange stuff. And you know, it's funny because I had this whole argument teed up in my mind about how it might be a little bit more expensive to 3D print these, but how they have so much more functionality and how it's worth it and yada, yada, yada. And then I looked online and wouldn't you know it, store-bought alternatives without half of the expansion options or customizability of these cost the same, or in some cases, even more than my PETG CF versions. And honestly, way more than just normal PETG printed versions, especially if you buy your filament in bulk. So let's get this straight. You get way more functionality, way more expandability, and cross-compatibility with everything in your workshop, and you actually save money? I mean, what's not to love here? 10 out of 10, S-tier 3D printed design. This is the reason you buy a 3D printer. Up next, let's switch gears to another source of frustration and chagrin in my studio, and that's my rolling tool cart. On one side of the cart, I keep tools and hardware, so it made a whole lot of sense to complement the shadow foam that it came with Gridfinity, which has kept the tool cart in pretty much tip-top shape. I even used Gridfinity on one of the drawers on the other side of the cart, which is completely dedicated to camera equipment, and it's been absolutely great. The problem, however, is the rest of the drawers, which house much bigger and more custom things like camera rigging equipment and batteries and things like that. So why not Gridfinity? I mean, these catch-all bins that I'm using aren't nearly as easy to reconfigure or rearrange as Gridfinity is. Plus, it feels like 80% of the time, whatever I need to store is right in between 2 sizes. So I end up wasting a ton of drawer space. But in reality, on that side, drawer space is not what I'm optimizing for. So much of what I'm storing, things like cables, chargers, and batteries, mounting brackets, it's all stuff that spends a lot of its life out of the drawer and mounted somewhere else. And even what is in the drawer is really unpredictable from day to day. It seems like I'm always destroying USB cables by tugging on them, and so I need to replace them, or I'm always trying out new camera rigging equipment for different shots. So it really seems silly to me to spend a week creating custom Gridfinity bins for each and every item, only for those items to sit empty or become obsolete in like a month. Also, because of the height of the drawers, a lot of the existing solutions for, say, storing cables in Gridfinity just aren't applicable to me. But honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'm just convincing myself because I already have a ton of these bins printed and I just hate waste. Let me know in the comments what you think. Am I fooling myself here? In the meantime though, I set about printing a ton more of these bins in all different sizes and colors to better fill up my drawers and just create a unique and dedicated spot for each individual item. And after about a day of printing on various printers, plus an hour or so of organizing and assembling and filling each of the bins, I was pretty happy with the results. Despite the bins not being very space efficient, I did manage to get everything into the drawers with plenty of room to spare, and actually, I now have an entire drawer completely free. I'm not sure what I'll put there, but I have some ideas. So hey, everything fit and then some. Problem solved, right? Well, not quite. Because there's just one thing that has always bothered me about these bins. And rather than explain it, let me just demonstrate it. Yeah, Totally fine for heavy-duty rigging equipment, not so much for an expensive camera. Fortunately, multi-material printing can totally save us here. And if you've seen some of my past videos on the subject, then you already know where this is going. For this, we're gonna create a custom multi-material version of this bin, printed by stitching together two distinct materials. I'm thinking we're gonna print it out of Soriatec TPU Air, which should grip onto the camera and protect it pretty well. And then we're gonna mix it with this roll of black hips that I've been meaning to use up. I mean, I figured, why not? The C5 Pro has a 65C heated and filtered chamber, so we shouldn't need to worry about fumes or warping. You know what I mean? Actually, I ended up printing a bunch of these bins in ABS just to use up old filament, and I'm very happy to report that unlike some of my other printers, the Creator 5 Pro's heated chamber prevented any warping, which is a huge win if you like ASA and ABS as much as I do. Anyways, back to the multi-material bin. I'm hoping that it's gonna turn out beautifully. I am always completely impressed when a printer has automatic filament calibration good enough to overcome the very unique properties of these filming materials, because having tried to tune them manually to the printers that don't, I can tell you that it is no small feat. So let's go ahead and get this bin printed out, test it out, and see how it works. Shall we?
Much better.
Now, for the finishing touch on this tool cart, I laser etched a bunch of custom labels in PETG-CF. I actually did a full video all about that project last week in case you missed it. At this point, all that was left was to stand back and admire my work. And what a difference. I am super happy with how this turned out. But that's just a few small battles. And like I said in the intro, this is a war. There are still so many places throughout my workshop and my home that I am not happy with. There's the area above my washer and dryer. There's my bedside table, my kids' bedrooms, the kitchen drawer that I thought I'd organized in a previous video, but it turns out was way too generic. And I'm not done. There's the office kitchenette, the resin room, and my desk. Don't even get me started on my desk. So now it's time to turn it over to all of you, because that's the beauty of the 3D printing community. We are all in this together, and many brains are so much better than just one mediocre one. Now, I'd love it if you guys drop some comments down below with your models, your ideas, and your suggestions. And in exchange, I'll be happy to use my unlimited filament supply and access to advanced machines to test out the models and let you guys know if they're actually worth it in the next video in the series. So if there's anything that you've been on the fence about printing, just drop it down below. I got you. For now though, I am already feeling way better in my space. Having these additional organizational systems in place was the opening blow that gave my colleague Jacques and I the motivation to actually tidy up and get things off the floor and get rid of a ton of stuff that had no business taking up space on the shelves. Things are still far from perfect, and I'll be reading your comments with great interest in search of the next steps in the journey. But for the first time in a long time, I was actually happy and calm when I walked into the studio this morning. And I just cannot overstate how big of a deal that is for me. So let's keep it going. And if you're interested in coming along for the journey, well, don't forget to subscribe. Like I said, we have some crazy new machines coming to the studio really soon that are going to prove to be really powerful. You are definitely not going to want to miss it. Till then, if this video featuring multi-material 3D printing has piqued your interest in the subject, you're definitely going to want to check out a video that I did recently where I explored the various different applications of multi-material printing, from the basic everyday stuff that we can already do to the advanced techniques that need more research and development from all of you. It was a lot of fun, and I guarantee you're going to learn something. That's all for this week, but I'll see all of you on the next layer.